The track you were just listening to is a little taste of a piece called Dig Deep by Bill Ryan. It was performed by Andy Hudson, our podcast guest today, and Michael Lomstern. And today I had the pleasure of sitting down with Dr. Andy Hudson for part two of an earlier episode. I believe that was episode four. If you haven't seen it already, please go check it out. It was a great conversation. We talked about his extended techniques book. And we talked about some of his future upcoming projects. And in this episode, we broke down some of his recent projects and albums that he has released, the meaning behind it, the stories behind it. It was a really great time. We talked about Obsolete Music by Jory Seo, Dig Deep by Bill Ryan, and Music for Falling and Flying by Nathan Hudson and Ben Laurie. He gave us direct insights into personal stories behind all these albums and offered some really great advice in creating beauty through sound in any sort of projects or albums that you are working on. Also, Andy, as well as the composers of these pieces, gave me permission to feature some of them on the podcast to share with you all. So I just included my favorite piece, Dig Deep, at the very beginning, and I'll be including the first full movement of Music for Falling and Flying at the very end for you all to check out and enjoy. Of course, I will be leaving links for albums and websites and everything you need to know down below. And so, on to why you all are here. Let's get into this interview with Dr. Andy Hudson. Check it out. Okay, well, welcome back, Clarinet Channel, to episode, is this 12? 13? 13. 13, yes. Welcome back to episode 13. My name's Emily Johnston. I am your host. And today, clarinet enthusiasts, we're doing something a little bit different. We have a part two to an earlier episode. I think I had you on back in, what was that, episode four? Five?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
while.
I'm really showing how much I know about my own episode history here. Yeah, we are joined again by Dr. Andy Hudson. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for making time for us.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this all started maybe, I don't know, back when I started the podcast back up because I had to take a break when I was finishing my last year of undergrad. Um, I decided, you know what, when I started stuff back up, people like to watch podcasts on YouTube sometimes. They like to see the video. I never really
Right.
had video version. And so I started posting some of the stuff onto my personal YouTube channel. And I talked about it a couple times on the podcast before. Some people went on there and watched it, but I only had the one YouTube channel. And my personal YouTube channel was filled with just a crazy mess of things. Back when I'd ever get the composition kick, like all my old compositions were on there, and then like some recordings of some random performances here and there, and then I started throwing the podcast on top of it. And so just a couple weeks ago, I decided, you know what, the Clarinet channel, it needs its own YouTube channel so people can find it easier. And so that required me to go through all the archives, find all the old episodes, and reach out to all the people um I did the interviews with in the past. And of course, those of you who've kind of been with me from the start, there was like a bit of a learning curve there. And some of the earlier episodes, especially yours, since it was one of the first, got deleted somehow. I don't know where it went. It erased,
It's
which,
somewhere.
I was like, no, that was such a good conversation. I wanted to post it so bad. And so I texted Andy about this. I was like, so sorry. I lost it. I don't know where it went. Too bad. And he was like, you know what? Why don't we make a second one? Why don't we do a part two? And I was like, that's a fantastic idea. And so we're back. We're back again, doing a little part two to where we left off the last time. And super excited.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's exciting to chat again. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So yesterday I listened to that old episode. Thankfully, not all is lost. We still have the audio. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Those of you who haven't listened to it, I recommend going back. It was a great conversation. We talked a lot about your book, Extended Techniques.
Oh,
Great, great chat. I loved learning more about that. And then we kind of went into a little bit of some of the projects you were doing, performances, albums. And for preparation for this podcast today, he sent me a couple of recordings of the projects that you've done. So it was obsolete music. Is that right?
Right,
I'm
with Latitude 49.
right. And then we had Dig Deep, that really cool
Bill
clarinet
Ryan.
duet.
Yeah.
Right. And then music for Falling and Flying.
Right, yeah.
Cool.
Great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All very different from each other.
Yeah, super cool stuff. So to start, you first sent me obsolete music. Um, Really cool. I noticed that the all the movements from that album, they all had just kind of like music terms for each
Right.
of the songs. And so I was curious, like, is that kind of meant to be like a play on music? What's the story behind that there?
So I'm artistic director and clarinetist with a sextet called Latitude 49. We're an ensemble dedicated to empowering composers of today and crossing boundaries. Geographically, that means that half the group is Canadian. The 49th parallel is what separates Canada from America. So Latitude 49, hence the name. Group's been going since 2012. I joined the group in 2017. And that was our fifth studio album, fifth full-length album. Just came out last summer. So in June, it came out on New Amsterdam Records. The story behind Obsolete Music is that we had a residency at Princeton University with this composer who's on faculty there, Juri Suh. And Juri is this just mad scientist, whimsical spirit being. I mean, she's just amazing. And she wrote for us 6 pieces that are in kind of 2 sets of 3. And Juri is very interested in counterpoint and in different kinds of contrapuntal forms, different kinds of early music forms. I mean, on the album there's so Latitude 49 is violin, cello, clarinets, saxophones, percussion, piano. And so on that album, I mean, there's a little bit of everything, right? There's some like loose jazz fusion, there's amplified harpsichord, there's quarter tone, microtone organ, there's extended bass clarinet, like lyrical cantus firmus writing. So Juri basically was able to write these pieces in a way that looked at these traditional forms, right? Fugue, rondo, cantus firmus. As you mentioned, they're all sort of standard musical forms, but everything got stood on its head and taken apart and put back together. And it's like this Russian doll where every piece has surprise after surprise inside of it. So for us, it meant that she sort of looked at our sextet as this blank canvas. And she wanted to see how she could try different ways of featuring different members of the ensemble. She wanted to try different percussion setups. There's drum set on one tune, and one tune has a bunch of wood blocks and cymbals, and there's piano, crazy piano writing, but also I mentioned harpsichord and synthesizer and microtonal organ, which is a surprise at the end of the Cantus Firmus, which is kind of shocking. You should have been in the room at Princeton the first time we played that piece, and everything is ringing, and then this microtuned organ comes on. Like, it just feels like time and space are splitting open. So yeah, Juri is a good friend of ours. We love her. We recorded those at Princeton, and then at our festival last summer in Calgary, the Sound Atlas Festival, Juri was our featured composer. So she came to Calgary, where we host our festival, and we played the whole album over the course of the weekend. We had other artists playing music by Juri, and then we got to do an album release party. So it was really fun to get it out in the world. I'm so proud of that album because the flexibility in the ensemble, I just found it so inspiring. Like every new moment required a new approach.
Mhm.
So much color required, crazy approaches to intonation and flexibility and timbre that, I think the result really stands on its own as an interesting experiment. And I think as a listening experiment, it's totally unique. I mean, I love listening to great contemporary music, and I have so many amazing colleagues who are in ensembles, and I just love buying their records and listening to them. And I hope that obsolete music is something kind of unique, kind of distinct. I think that Jury's musical voice is just so very engaging and surprising, and for me, it's delighting. I just find myself smiling when I listen to her music because you just never know what's gonna come out of the Jack in the Box next.
Right. Yeah. I think what I found most cool about all these different projects that you did, not just this one, but almost all of them, every single one I listened to, it was like um there was like a steady groove in it, but it was hard to find like where the downbeats were. Like I was listening to some of them, and
Me
I'd be
too.
like
Hard for me
tapping.
too.
Yeah, I'd be like tapping and be like, this is the beat, but like, what time signature are we in? I don't know. And so I wrote that down as a question to ask you. It's just like, what time signature is this in? I
The
hope
answer is
not in 4/4.
a lot of time signatures.
Oh,
Um,
right, yeah.
you're totally right. I mean, Jury, especially in the ostinato, for example, on
Hmm.
Obsolete Music, which is one of my favorite tracks. That recording turned out so well. There are moments in the piece that even when I'm playing it on stage, I can't believe it as it goes by. It seems impossible to me what is happening. Like some of the transitions, with
Yeah.
the percussion, they're so complex that as they go by, it just feels like it's just a transformation. And what I think is so fun about listening to music is the way that as we get sort of swept up in the groove, then we're susceptible to being surprised or
Hmm.
challenged, and all of a sudden the composer can play with us after they have us on the hook. And yeah, I think throughout that album and yeah, the other projects too, I think there's this sense that you sort of get in the river and you start to float, and then who knows what you're gonna run into.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely had that sensation for the obsolete music, as well as the next project, which was the Dig Deep, like the clarinet, bass clarinet duet you did with Michael Lone Stern, right?
Yeah.
It also had like that groove where I just kind of sat there like, okay, here's the beat, but can't find the downbeat, and then it had like that huge pause in the beginning where it was like, wow, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
So super cool.
Dig Deep was
Yeah.
so Michael and I mean, Michael's a friend of mine. I think he's one of the greatest bass clarinetists ever to live, and he's one of the best guys I've ever met. He's
Hmm.
just wonderful artist, and I think an important leader in our field. And Michael and I share a very close mutual friend, the composer Bill Ryan. And my first year at Lawrence, Michael came up as a guest artist. He wrote to me when I got the job and said, "Hey, I want to come see your students. Let's figure out a time." So Michael planned a trip, and the students and I were ready to host him. And my friend Bill Ryan, this composer who wrote Dig Deep and who's written a bunch of other things I've played, reached out to me and said, "Hey, could I come visit too while Michael's in town? Like, I love Michael." And yeah, so the three of us hung out here, and um, leading up to the visit to Appleton, Bill had sketched out this bass clarinet duo that became Dig Deep for us, and we workshopped it right here in my office, and had the chance to sort of try these different rhythms and how they interlock. And it's a really complex piece. And so the first thing we did was record the piece. Before we premiered it, we recorded it. So we recorded, from a distance together, and put together our parts and got everything dialed in. And then Mike, I think, did the mixing and the editing, and then they took it to Zach, who played the drum part. There's two tracks on the
Hmm.
album, right? There's the bass clarinet duet without drums, and then there's the bass clarinet duet with Zach playing the drums. And you can also do the piece live, either just bass clarinets or bass clarinet with the track Zach made, or with live improvised drum set. So it's a really versatile piece, and it's amazing how each version is just really different. I don't know that one or the other grooves harder. They're just different. When there's all the empty space without the drums, that's one sort of sensation. And with the drums is a totally different kind of energy and feeling. And then I've done it live also. There's a version with Barry saxophone I've done with Latin percussion, and that's a totally different experience too. So it's the hallmark of a good piece, I think, that it holds up to multiple interpretations. And for me, I just love Bill's writing. It's so engaging and so rhythmic and fun.
Hmm.
And Bill and I just we're very close friends. We work in a collective together, along with cellist Nick Vitinos and composer Mark Melitz, and the four of us do a lot of projects together, both here and also in Bucharest, Romania. So we spend a lot of time together, and I just love playing Bill's music whenever I can. And to play with Mike was a dream. I mean, Mike's one of my heroes and one of my friends, and they say you should never meet the people you admire, but just playing in the same room as Mike, when we gave the live premiere at Low Clarinet Fest in Arizona in January of this year, you know, walking on stage and getting to share that space with him and with all the people there was really, it's a rewarding sensation. You know, it's something special about our community that we don't gatekeep from each other, but we try to bring everyone along. And I try to do this with my own students and my younger colleagues. And I'm grateful for people like Mike who've done that for me and plenty of others. You know, I can name so many great artists who've invested in me, and I don't take that for granted. I think it's my responsibility to then pay that forward so that you know you bring others with you, and we don't try to build fences. We just build longer and longer tables, you know, so that more and more people can be part of this community and can play and be empowered and hear each other. And I just think that's the best part.
Right. Yeah. I think that, I mean, if everybody listens to all these different projects you did and the ones we're going to outline today, everyone would probably have like their own favorite or ones that stands out to them. But to me, I think this one was my favorite. And
Yeah.
even going forward, listening to this, I was like, wow, like going forward into the future, I think that this might be part of the standard clarinet rep, you know?
Yeah.
Um, moving forward. And so I don't know if you listened to any of the past episodes I did. I did last one I did was with Mark Dover and then Jeff Anderley. But to start Mark's interview, his podcast, we talked a lot about his new album that just won a Grammy, and I put a little snippet of it in the beginning. And if it's okay with you, and of course with Michael as well, I would love to put a little snippet of this at the beginning of
Yeah.
the interview because I'm like, man, I think especially, you know, the Clarinet Channel, people who listen would love to hear a little snippet of this.
I think that would be super rad.
Yeah.
And that album from Mark is so great. I mean,
Hmm.
Mark's my colleague at New Deco Ensemble in Miami, and we play together down there some. And I just think the world of him. And yeah, man, and Jeff. Wow, Jeff's coming up here to visit in March to work with my students, and we're gonna play together. Yeah, just those are all the homies, you know. Assemble the
Hmm.
homies, let's get them all together. Well, those are two, you know, between Michael and Mark and Jeff. That's like most of Mount Rushmore for me for
Uh-huh.
clarinet.
It's like the Clarinet Avengers.
Yeah, those guys. I'm like, yeah, I'm the guy in the back, and the cape's not quite fitting right, but I'm doing my best to hang on.
Yeah, so I love what you do, what you're doing with these albums. And I guess one of my biggest questions for you would be, how did you get involved in projects like these? Like, how did you get in contact with these composers and get into these groups and started with these projects? What did that look like for you?
It's a great question. For me, I think music is always the overflow of relationship. That's how I find the most meaningful collaborations. So when I think about how I spend most of my time during the year, the groups that I play with, the organizations that I support, so many of them are the result of one relationship or another. So, you know, I just got back from playing Weber's first concerto in North Carolina with Lee County Orchestra, and got to do the concert twice in the weekend, which is really fun. And I've been a soloist, I don't know, 25 or 30 times, but I'd never played Weber one. I'd never even learned it. I had taught it to students, but I'd never learned it myself, and I never memorized it. So this was the first time. And the conductor of that group, Vincent Pavage, is a dear friend of mine because he's the conductor of an ensemble called Ear Space that I've played in since 2016. And that collaboration with Earspace came because of a mutual connection. We had a dear friend of mine who Vincent had worked with, and Vincent was looking for a clarinetist for a new group in North Carolina, and I was living in Chicago at the time, but we were connected, and I've been playing with that group ever since. And so then, from that collaboration with Earspace, I had this chance to go play the Weber Concerto #1 for the first time, which was a different way to collaborate with this person. Vincent's usually conducting really avant-garde contemporary stuff, super thorny. I'm not kidding. We just did a project with a bunch of 25/16 bars. Like, why? I don't, that, it's in the piece, So this was such a treat. Like, wow, we're really just in 3/4, aren't we? That is such a luxury right now. And with Latitude 49, I mean, similarly, I was connected with the group by a mutual friend. They were looking for a new clarinetist, and they had an audition process, but I was contacted and invited to audition and apply, and went through that journey. And there was this kind of soul-searching process of do my values align with your values? Because even if the playing is top-notch, it's hard to want to put in what it takes to run a chamber ensemble unless you really share a purpose. Because there's so much DIY involved in it. There's so much blood and sweat and tears in what we do. There's so much sacrifice, even for professional groups like Latitude that record albums and play all over the world. There has to be this equity of purpose to get through the tough moments and to learn the really hard pieces and to push through the difficult gigs. I think that it comes back to that purpose. And what for us as an ensemble, as a sextet, that purpose has led to a deep friendship and camaraderie and almost a family sense. And do you ever want to kill your family? Sometimes, once in a while. But the love is deeper than just, hey, we're playing music together today. It's really a more meaningful connection. And I think you can hear that on the album. I mean, I'm so proud of the way that Max and I played with Andy Hall the opening of the Cantus Firmus with the bass clarinet, the low bass clarinet, and the cello drone and the bari sax. Like, that turned out so beautifully. And I remember being in that session and just feeling this energy and goodwill from my colleagues that led me to want to be my best self.
Mm-hmm.
And, with Dig Deep was the same thing, right? Michael and I had a connection, Bill and I had a connection, Bill and Michael had a connection. And it's the overflow of that relationship that I think allows us to do our best work, because it allows us to be fully vulnerable. I can take chances because my goal is not to impress my friends. My goal is to make great art, and my friends can help me refine that. They can produce. They can, oh, could you try that again and get this take a little different? That's a little out of tune. Could you make this phrase more compelling? And also, I feel brave in those situations to be an artist who takes chances in the moment, because I don't think that perfection is a real goal. I think that connection is a real goal. But even if we pick the note perfect take, there's always a trade-off. There's always something you exchange for every take. You pick the take with the right notes, maybe you're exchanging the phrase that's in the take with the slight blip. So there's always a trade-off. One of my mentors, Mallory Thompson, band director at Northwestern University for a long time, she told me one time that putting out a recording was like revealing your priorities to the field. Because all of a sudden you've showed them, I had a chance to pick any take I wanted, and these are the ones I picked. And I've never forgotten that. It's the chance to kind of, it's like you show your hand, like these are the cards I'm holding. And every artist is different, If we go listen to Mark's album, and if we listen to Jeff's recordings and my recordings and Michael's recordings, they might all have some different values. And that's actually great. That's actually amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I come together to collaborate with someone like Michael or like Latitude, then we have to decide together what the values are going to be in this recording. And it might be that it's a combination, a third way from each of us. And that's why chamber music and collaboration is so important, is that it helps us find deeper and new and fresh and more challenging and more satisfying kinds of collaboration. And sitting next to Michael is different than sitting next to Mark, and they're both really, really inspiring. And I just want to pay that forward. I want to be that for others if I can offer that inspiration, offer that strength of purpose, that clarity of meaning. I think that's what music's all about.
Yeah. Fantastic. I mean, that is really well put. What you said kind of reminded me of last last semester I did of school. I had this conducting professor. I had to take conducting as part of the performance degree, and every single class we were all required to uh, prepare like a little excerpt from like conducting rep, and we would conduct each other when we'd play these pieces as for like practice and that kind of stuff. Um, and he would always say, like, to be a conductor means you have to learn to be vulnerable in front of other people. And at
Mhm.
first, it just didn't really, hit me in the right way. It didn't really process. But then watching just some of the greats, some of the great conductors and performers all over, like, they have learned to be really vulnerable and show that side of themselves. It's just like you said, lay out your hand, and it just produces like the most amazing results.
And I think it's only in classical music that we view vulnerability as negative. I mean, think about a rock concert you've been to or a pop concert. When the singer goes really hard and tries to reach for the high note and hold it kind of long and it cracks just a little bit at the end, that's a feature, not a bug. You know what I mean? There's something human about that, something passionate, something worth celebrating. It's only in classical music that we decide that the secret is to paint by numbers exactly the way it's been done before.
Right.
I don't think that that's the most satisfying way. Now, I'm not saying we don't honor what's on the page. I'm not saying we don't do what Pierre Boulez insists we do, which is be stewards of the score, because we are. Like if Beethoven writes that crescendo, we got to hear it. But I still think there's a way to approach traditional repertoire in the canon, new pieces, all with the same heart, which is I wonder what of myself I can bring to this. I wonder what I could do to bring this to life in a way that only I could in this day, in this year, in this place. Because if we do it again, like I played this concerto twice last weekend. I played Weber one Saturday night. I played it again Sunday afternoon. And it was different both times. Not just like the energy, but I tried a few different ornaments each time. I took a little more time, a little less time. It was a little faster, a little slower. And those weren't choices I made, like let's make it different for fun. They're choices you make because the space you're in actually matters and the people there matter and they bring different things. And you just have to be open, I think, to what miracle might occur in this new space.
Yeah, for sure. I don't remember what teacher it was who told me this last year, but I remember I found this really fascinating. There's some other country or culture out there in the world who d from different from our culture, like if we have like a piece of like a sheet music or a score or something like that, oftentimes we call that, oh, that's music, that's my music, sheet music or whatever. There's some other country or culture, I wish I remember which one it was, but they don't refer to that as music. That's separate from music, like the computerized
Yeah.
printed out instructions is completely different from like the actual sound and the actual motion you're putting into the sound. It's like two separate things. And I always thought that was just like the most beautiful thing.
Well, and I feel like so much of my practice on the clarinet and on the bass clarinet is to try to remove the instrument from being an obstacle and instead view it as a partner and a possibility center.
Hmm.
I don't want to have this relationship with the clarinet where the goal is that it's just right and that I accommodate the clarinet's desire, but rather like how can I use this gift of the clarinet, all of its idiosyncrasies, its messed up overtone series that's missing every other overtone, like how can I use this reed that may be a little dry or weird and maybe my B key's not sealing perfectly, like how do all those things come together so that I can take the phrase I hear right here and get it out of my heart through the conduit of the clarinet and into the audience,
Hmm.
or even just out of my heart through the conduit of the clarinet and into the space that I'm inhabiting. Like how can I partner with this thing to make something beautiful and more beautiful than the sum of the parts, you know? Like there's so many so many things about the clarinet that are frustrating, right? Like it's hard to play really soft on an entrance and like, oh, staccato in this register is difficult and I wish I could tongue faster. I don't know. Like there's an inherent limitation to that, and I think that's actually beautiful. Like I think there's possibility in that. And I agree with what you're saying that it's easy to get fixated on like this 8.5 by 11 sheet when that's really not why people go to concerts. I think
Mhm.
most people go to concerts because they want to feel something.
Mhm.
And what they feel, I mean, well, that's where we get to be curatorial, right? It's almost liturgical the way we get to think about leading someone through a concert. It's like, okay, they're going to come in, and the way I've programmed this concert and the way I play and the colors I choose to use, all those things combine and create this sonic and embodied experience. And I don't think we can take that lightly. I think it's really important that we feel the weight of that responsibility, that we have empathy for our audience and understand like they don't have to care. Like just because they bought a ticket doesn't mean they have to care. So we have to really be thinking, how can I be so clear with my artistic vision so that there's a reason they should listen, that there's something worth hearing happening, that something's being said beyond these are the notes and rhythms. I tell my students all the time that the worst thing about the clarinet is that it has like an F sharp button and that you don't have to find F sharp before you can sing it.
Mhm.
Like we just push the button and we think that's the music, but that's not it, right? Like that's not how it works. It's you could play all the right notes and all the right rhythms, and you still didn't play the Mozart concerto. Because there's another level occurring that transcends like I found the right kit, you know, like I found the right button to push or the right key to depress. It's like a little bit of a lazy goal, I think. There's more than that. Like there's that yes and, right? We don't throw that out. But I just think that for me, music is so much more than yeah, than the accuracy and I want to honor what's on the page, but I also want to be open to how it might transform me and I might transform it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Really well put. I had a teacher once who I think this kind of describes what you're saying, but he'd always say, like, be sure to take care of your soul because your instrument is an extension of your soul. And how can you expect to play beautiful music if you don't like work on having a beautiful soul?
Yeah, we do not become better musicians by becoming less human, in my
Yeah.
opinion. I think we owe it to ourselves to cultivate that. And for me, it means I mean, I listen to clarinet music, especially from my friends, like you mentioned, Mark or Jeff or Michael. But I listen to mostly like, you know, emo and rap and punk and pop punk and rock and indie and folk and country. Like for me, that's what I'm putting in my ears. And I think it shows up in my playing. I'm not saying it's right or wrong or better or worse. It's just the way I sound because of what I hear. And there are things that are important to me. Going back to the recording conversation, I bet if you line me and all my favorite clarinetists up, we would all pick different takes of the same thing because they would align with what we each want to hear in the music. And that's so great. You know, I think when I was young, it really felt like, well, somebody's right and somebody's wrong.
Mhm.
And now it's like, well, everybody's expressive, so everybody deserves a spot in my ears right now. I want to hear that, see what I can learn.
Yeah. They're
And it doesn't have to
unique.
be, yeah, right. It doesn't have to be to my liking. I can still say, wow, what a perspective.
Hmm.
Maybe I have a different one. Great, that's fine. It's okay.
Yeah. I feel like this conversation we're having is a really good segue into talking about the third project that you sent me,
Yes. Yeah.
Music for Falling and Flying. Now, this one was the one I think I had the most amount of questions about because I sat down and I really tried to think about, well, what is this about? You know, what is the meaning? What is the story here? And this one I had the most amount of trouble with. I gotta be honest. So it's the title is like okay, and then the picture is a picture of maybe some octopus lobster thing.
The squid, yeah.
And then it starts with I think four pieces, all very beautiful, but so unique in their own way. So it starts with brace yourself. And so it's like, okay, I'm braced, I'm ready. And then you play the most amazing clarinet solo I think I've ever heard. It's like, wow, this is another one for the books for sure. And then there's the duck, completely different instrumentation, music for falling and flying, which is repeat again, and then one just called God. And that one was also one that really caught my eye. It was just like, whoa, it's kind of like has a really serious title. It's just very straight and to the point. So I listened to it. Very, very interesting. I'm really curious to hear what was your take on this? What was the
Yeah.
story? The preparation, the artistry that went into it. Just
Yeah, this is an
no.
interesting project. Yeah, I'm glad you got to listen to it.
Yeah.
So, Music for Falling and Flying is a project I had the chance to be a part of, partially because the composer of all the pieces is my brother, Nathan Hudson.
I noticed that. Yeah, I was
Uh,
gonna ask if there was a
Yeah,
relation. Yeah.
he's a professor of music down in Charlotte at Central Piedmont Community College, and he teaches, I don't know, theory and oral skills and jazz and trumpet and composition. He's amazing. And he has a very close relationship with this author, Ben Lurie. And I remember the moment that he found out about Ben Lurie because he was visiting me in Chicago. We were driving one night and we had on the radio the NPR program This American Life with Ira Glass. And This American Life was doing a program about Valentine's Day, about love. And I remember that this author came on to read a story, and he had this kind of scratchy voice. And it was this whole story about a duck who falls in love with a rock. And all the other ducks make fun of him and tell him he's stupid, except for this one girl duck who thinks it's sweet. And the other ducks decide they're going to push the rock off the cliff to show the duck how stupid he is. And then, spoiler alert, the rock turns into a swan, right, and flies away. And then the girl duck and the duck live happily ever after. So this author reads the story, start to finish, it's probably 10 minutes, I don't know. And I saw Nathan get out his notebook, make a few notes, put it away. And, 10 years later, we made an album with that story set to music. So Nathan and Ben have collaborated now for almost a decade. And this album was sort of a labor of love between the two of them. So Ben's stories inspire each of the pieces or are in relationship with each of the pieces. So Brace Yourselves is paired with a story Ben wrote called The Squid Who Fell in Love with the Sun. Are you seeing a theme here?
Hmm.
There's this great scene. We did a project at Stony Brook University in 2017 where Ben would read the stories and we would play these pieces. And I remember when he was reading the story before I played, there's this really intense emotional climax where the squid who's fallen in love with the sun builds this spaceship to get to the sun, and he gets caught in the sun's gravitational pull, and he's getting sucked in and feeling everything get hot. And he says something like, I'm paraphrasing, he says, "Oh my God, this thing I love is going to kill me." And it really hit me like this is intense music about desire and loss and truth and discovering what the things we want actually are like when we get them. And then to play Nathan's piece right after that was really powerful because that clarinet and piano piece is just all killer, no filler. I mean, it's a really special piece. And I love playing it. It's so hard and so good. I think it's one of my favorite contemporary clarinet sonatas. Whatever you call it, I don't know if it's a sonata, but it's a really great piece. And then the rest of the album kind of follows suit, where they're in conversation, Nathan's music with Ben's stories. So the rest of the album continues these conversations. Nathan wrote that piece, The Duck, which is a really beautiful setting. It's kind of fun. There's narration. It's almost like a children's setting. It reminds me of Peter and the Wolf a little bit, except
Hmm.
the duck and the duck and the rock. And I remember when he wrote that and giving the premiere of it in New York and loving it so much. And then Music for Falling and Flying is a bit of a dark story. It's also the title track. I actually have the handwritten manuscript of that piece somewhere in this office. Um, it's this really heavy story called The Well that Ben wrote that Nathan is sort of thinking about. And in the story, this boy falls into a well and he can't get out, and he's just, screaming and treading water, and his dad comes running after him, and his dad tries to get him out, but his dad also falls into the well. And they're both in the well, and they're just trying to swim, and they're flapping their arms, and everything gets kind of quiet, and then they flap their arms long enough that they both grow wings, and they fly out of the well. And there's lots of ways to interpret what that means, but for me, that means that, yeah, there's sort of this loss, and then this ascension. And it's really a striking piece on the album. It's for two vocalists, cello and clarinet, and there's no real notational rhythm. It's all sort of these gestures that emerge and stop, and then there's these intentional blips in the sound that sort of hum as if everything is a little bit electrostatic. I'd never played it before we did the recording. He wrote it for another ensemble, Unheard of Ensemble, which is a great group, and it's very emotional music, very difficult in some ways to play. And then the last piece on the album, God, was a piece that when Nathan first started writing it had not yet been published by Ben. And it's very heavy as well. The basic story is that this man decides that he's tired of breathing, and he wants to take the necessary steps to stop breathing. And then when he gets to heaven, he's frustrated because he's still breathing, and he goes trying to find God. He finds God, but God is sort of watching TV and doesn't have time for him and just throws him out of heaven. And then as the man is falling back to earth, the wind that enters his lungs becomes this song, and he starts to sing this song about the life that he hadn't lived, that he wished he'd lived. And he starts to remember all the things in his life that were beautiful and the people he loved. And then he hits the ground, and that's the end of the story. So it's very emotional music. And for Nathan and I, we've collaborated many times over the years. He's written so much music I've played, and he's just a thoughtful, really engaged composer with a wide sonic palette. The piece God was especially emotional for us because he wrote it as my mom was dying. And it was the last piece of his that she ever got to see. And I remember when he first showed her the score, she would call me on the phone and she just couldn't shut up about it, how beautiful the piece was. And, when we gave the premiere of that piece at Elon University a couple of years ago, there's this part at the end where the two leads, one of them is singing all these things that he wished he had experienced, and the other one is just doing this monosyllabic song following. And I remember for us watching, I remember at the premiere, Nathan was in the audience, I was playing on stage, of course, and we were both just like crying our eyes out, kind of thinking through what it meant to lose someone that you love and how there were these experiences that we wouldn't have again. And that piece, I'm so grateful that it does, that piece really ends with a place of hope, even though it's a heavy material. The piece ends with this sort of up-tempo, upbeat moment where the song that is sung in that moment of loss carries on and becomes part of the wind that then will enter others. And I think that's the way I think about love and loss, is that the people that we lose go on inside of us, and that the things that they've said stay close to us. And I find that very comforting and beautiful. But it was very special to collaborate with him because, we grew up playing music together, and my brother started composing in high school, and, he wrote some of his earliest compositions for us, pieces that he now tries to disavow, but that I still think are pretty good. So I still play them sometimes. And it's really always a pleasure. And we're actually scheming up some new stuff right now to hopefully continue collaborating. And that album was, a really personal project, and in some ways was difficult. I was very close to it, and the closer you are to something, the harder it can be to view it, with enough distance to make the right artistic choices. And this is the great tension of the artist, is how do I put my whole self into this, but also not allow my whole self to be impacted by an evaluation of this? I encourage all my students to have things in their life that keep them grounded, right? So I encourage my students to have practices that engage their souls and minds, and then practices that put them in a community, and practices that engage their physical selves, just so that they remember that they're more than their art. And like you said earlier in this interview, we nurture our souls and our bodies and our communities, and that makes us a better artist. But I remember in the recording process, it was difficult to find that distance in the session because I just felt so close to that piece. And thank goodness we'd hired great producers and engineers who were able to coach through the session. You know, clarinetist sharp, let's do it again. Because I don't think I was really in a headspace to find that. But the flip side of that, I think, is that, yeah, you have to find people you trust to make those choices on your behalf in the session. And then you can be set free to just be the creator. You know, I think creating and evaluating are different processes. And the great thing about having a producer who can run the session, have you do it again, tell you what you need to do differently, is that you just get to be a creator. And you can turn off the part of your brain that's telling you how it's going and just focus on making it go.
Right. Wow. What a beautiful way of storytelling, really. Um, I am like excited to go back and listen to it again with just fresh ideas as to like what this means, what this meant to your brother, and what this meant to you. Um, wow, yeah, what a great piece of work.
I remember when he was fundraising for that project, my brother's a very good fundraiser, and he was putting together this big campaign, and we were talking through. We'd already premiered all the pieces, and I was over in Egypt at the time, teaching at the Cairo Conservatory and doing some playing in Alexandria and in Cairo. And I called my grandfather on his 98th birthday. He passed away very soon after that. And I remember having this conversation with him, and he just had all these questions about music and what I was playing. And he wanted to know all about Egypt. And he kept saying, I just never saw the pyramids, but I always wanted to. And yeah, I just love the way that music provides this bridge to people that we love and even to people that we don't love. You know, music can provide this chance to experience or feel or think about something in a small, partial way that you haven't lived. It doesn't make me have the experience of someone who's had a different experience, but it does allow us to, in the moment, share that experience with one another. I think it can build bridges in a way that few things can. It's so embodied, you know, it's so special in that way. And I am guilty, as maybe you are, maybe others listening are. I'm guilty of forgetting that that's the great calling of the musician, is to connect, you know, and so it's been really, yeah, I think that project with Nathan, I'm really proud of it. I think the people played great. That first track with Annie Jang, the pianist, she's just a monster, and I know it's so hard for her too. And yeah, and it was a different sort of project for me in some ways. You know, it was interesting to do this thing and to serve my brother's vision for that and to collaborate. And you know, he's done plenty of other recordings with other people, but it was fun to be part of one.
Yeah. Yeah, no, learning all of that about all of that music that you sent me, I was curious, but now I'm almost scared to ask the question. Do you have a favorite track or one that stands out to you?
Mhm. That's a great question.
Often the hardest one I ask people
I think it
sometimes.
changes.
Yeah.
You know, when I look back on recording, so I have a new album that's not released yet. It's coming out
Mm.
soon. It's called Hunger, and it features music by Mark Mellitz, Augusta Reed Thomas, John Cage, Bruno Mantovani, my brother, and also composer Zachary Good. And it's going to be great. Hopefully out before the end of the year. And it's done. And as I was reflecting on that session, which, you know, I've gotten the mixes back, it's been mastered, is just about ready to go. I find that the pieces on the album that I resonate with now, listening to it, are the ones that I struggled the most with in the moment. And that's true of every project, you know, we've done. Parts of Dig Deep I listened to that I'm so proud of. I know it was hard to get that take.
Mhm.
And parts of obsolete music, especially in the Cantus Firmus and the Ostinato, which I love both, really pushed me to the edge. And Brace Yourselves on Nathan's album, what a hard piece. And I just remember trying to get everything just right in this one really soul-crushing moment where I realized I'd been playing this one measure wrong for like 10 years.
Oh no.
The producer was like, I think that's supposed to be this other rhythm, right? And I was like, no, no, no. And then I said, oh
Mhm.
no. Yeah, so I think for me, there's something in the struggle, in the work that's really satisfying.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think that it changes day to day, but it's often that the pieces that I had to wrestle the most to get to the ground, that I had to work the hardest for, are my favorite. And I also just love tracks where I get to hear my colleagues. I mean, I love Dig Deep because I love listening to Michael and I love listening to Zach. And I love, the Fugue because I love listening to my colleagues in Latitude 49. And I love listening to the Duck because I love listening to my colleagues. And Jonathan Poquet, the conductor, just did a great job with that project. And yeah, so I think it goes both ways. In some ways, it's the ones where I hear my colleagues thriving and the ones where I'm struggling that really resonate with me now.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know if I could speak for any of the people out there listening, but I could definitely say that I'm leaving this conversation with a lot of new inspiration and motivation. It's like, oh, it's time to go practice now.
That's what
Time to go.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, super cool. Yeah, like as per usual, I'll list everything down below and socials, and as I mentioned before, um I just created the Clarinet channel, new YouTube channel, which was kind of cool. I created it like a couple weeks ago, just posted a couple of videos on there. I didn't post or say anything about it, but some of y'all have found it, have been watching, subscribing. And so thank you guys for tuning in. That's so awesome. Um, and yeah, I guess before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to add or mention to the listeners out there?
Yeah, it's been fun when you were asking about the recordings ahead of the conversation, I was so excited because it's not so many times you make the recording and you put it in the world and then you just move on. And so it's really fun for me to get to revisit these three projects that have come out recently and also to think about, yeah, the forthcoming album with Hunger. And I have another album that's done that's coming later, which is I can't talk about yet, but it's really exciting. And it's fun to think about. I used to worry so much about recording because it felt like, well, I'm never going to be good enough to record. But
Hmm.
I I tell my students all the time that performances are just postcards. A performance is like a letter from me to you in this moment about how it's going right now. So a
Hmm.
performance is just like, here's where I'm at on Monday afternoon at 3:15. Um, and recordings are a little more intense than that, but I think they're time capsules. They're a snapshot of a moment in time. And when I listen back to old recordings, it's easy to judge our younger self, right? But I think it's actually really important to have compassion on that younger self who made that recording, who had the guts to step in the arena and create this artifact, to put it on paper, to put it on disc, to put it on file. This is what I think about this music today. And I don't feel like I have to stay there. I've played Brace Yourselves since we recorded it a number of times, and I play it a little differently than I used to. I've played Dig Deep since, and it's a little different. Latitude has played that whole album since a bunch of times, and it's a little different now. And I think it's tempting to think about a recording as the end of a piece, but I like to think about it as the beginning of the piece. You make the recording, and then you finally know it well enough to start experimenting. You get to put up drapes in the house, and you get to paint it whatever new color you want because the structure's there now. And you've seen what it looks like in one successful configuration, so now you can move the furniture around. Now you can try new things. And yeah, I used to feel so paralyzed by the prospect of recording, but for me now, I want to record as much as I can because there's a discovery process in the studio that's very special. And so yeah, thanks for the chance to revisit these three projects and to tell stories about them because they're pretty personal. Like it's interesting to think through them now and realize all three of the albums we discussed, Obsolete Music, Dig Deep, and Music for Falling and Flying, have a lot of myself wrapped up in them. There's a lot of soul that went into those, and yeah, it's pretty fun to get to revisit that and think about it. And I hope people listening will check them out and yeah, let me know what they like or don't like, or if they want to play the music, they should definitely do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember like a year ago you were talking about, oh, I have these new projects and they should be coming out soon and I'm excited about it. And it's so great that, now a year later, then we get to sit down and talk about like what that process meant to you and the meaning behind those albums. And then I got so excited when you're like, I have more stuff coming out. It's like, oh boy.
Never stop, on the
Yeah, I
treadmill.
know, I know. I can't wait for the next stuff to come out. And if you ever want to come back and share more about
Oh, I
your
love
next albums, please do. Just hit me up and we'll schedule a time. It'd be great.
I would love that. That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for making the time for us today.
Thanks. What a pleasure. Yeah, so great to chat with you.
Yeah, of course. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of the Clarinet Channel with Dr. Andy Hudson. As per usual, I've listed all links to socials, websites, etc. down below for you all to check out. And like I mentioned before in the podcast, all video versions will now be posted onto the Clarinet Channel's YouTube channel at the Clarinet Channel Pod for all you people out there who like to watch video versions of podcasts. And of course, audio versions will still be available on Spotify, Apple Music, and my website for you all to check out at emilyjohnston.com. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I will be including the first movement from Music for Falling and Flying. Here, it is called Brace Yourselves, an impact for clarinet and piano. And so here it is. I hope you enjoy, and I will see you all in the next episode.
Thank you.